The next thing I want to cover is, I know Josh, you and I have talked a lot about like mirrorless versus DSLR, but Nikon has come out with two mirrorless cameras, the Z6 and the Z7, which are respectively priced. Well, I don't want to say respectively priced. They're priced at the Z6 at $1,996 and the Z7 at $3,396. I love the idea of more companies making mirrorless full frame cameras. I think that's awesome. You know, I think that Sony's done really well with the mirrorless market. So has Fuji, so has Leica, so has Hasselblad. Here's where Nikon is messed up though. And I'm just going to read some things off and I'm going to compare these side by side. I'm going to compare this to the Sony a7 III, which is also, you know, it's a relatively recent camera. Okay. So, and this is also another problem too. The a7 III is $1,000 less. Okay. The Nikon Z7, 4K, 30 FPS recording for video. Okay. Exact same as the a7 III. Only minus the S-Log3 that the a7 III has, because that's just kind of a Sony thing. They both have the monitors that flip in the exact same direction. You can't actually flip them around and see yourself. But the Z7 has, let's see if I have it right here, 439-point phase detection autofocus. And a max ISO, which is basically how much light you can add to it, of 102,400. A7 III, $1,000 less. Also 4K 30 FPS, has a higher burst frame rate for photography. The hybrid autofocus has 693 phase detection autofocus points and 425 contrast detection autofocus points. Whereas the Nikon Z7, the new one that came out that's $1,000 more, has 493 total phase detection autofocus points versus the 693 plus 425.
I don't think that the A7 or the new Z7 or whatever the fuck it is, I don't think it's made for video though, to be honest. I think it can do video, but
there is a point with that too.
5.7 megapixel sensor, which is fucking ginormous.
Yes. Now
so
with that
leads me to believe it's for photo.
Well, there's another thing with that too. So the a7 III has a max ISO of 204,800, which is literally to the dot double the maximum low light capability of the Nikon Z7. But for that $1,000 more that the Nikon is, you get a max resolution of 8,256 by 5,504 versus the A7's 6,000 by 4,000. But the A7 has better low light photography and can shoot burst photography at a higher frame rate.
These are very specific things. Do you need burst photography? Because if you're doing like on a racetrack, if you're shooting racetracks, you need a burst. You need to have the fastest burst. But if you're shooting a wedding, you know, maybe when they throw the bouquet, like that does not matter.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
we're talking about weighing the You're talking about things that have like 5 or 6 big numbers, and then you got to pick 2 or 3 of those and make that the deciding factor.
Well, here's
honestly,
what you're getting.
To me, what the Z7 or the Z7 is it called the Z7? Is that what
Nikon Z7?
Okay, what I would use it for, like if I were looking at this to buy, is if I were a like real professional, non-sports, non-fast-paced photography. So like somebody, like if I was photographing cars for like Lamborghini or something, where I get to set up all the lights, I get to make a billboard, you know, it's well thought out, it's planned, there's a team, I'm not under pressure. This is a camera I would look at. I don't need super high ISO because you know, I'm never going to go that high.
I agree with that. But here's the thing.
You know, I don't need super fast frame rates. It doesn't matter.
You're getting about 20% more resolution as your max photo resolution for about $1,000, close to $1,500 actually, now that I'm looking at it, more. And you're going to get significantly less lens support. Really, what you have, the biggest advantage.
I'm not claiming it's a great improvement.
Oh, I know, but I'm just
arguably not even an improvement, but you know.
I just question whether, I question what they were like. What were they trying to do here? Like, where were they trying to win at? Because yeah, they are pulling a higher resolution by. I mean, I'd say, you know, 20 to 30% is a notable percentage. But in all the other areas where it just lines up the same or undercuts a camera that's $1,500 less that has significantly better lens support, I don't see a place in the market for this camera. Because at that price point, most people are going to be using Sonys or Canons that have much better lens support, that are more established already. Or
yeah,
they're going
unless you have a Nikon already and you're trying to get like the next best thing. you know?
Yeah, and the biggest point of mirrorless, most people get mirrorless for video because they're small and you can fit them on gimbals and things like that. That's kind of one of the big things that brought mirrorless into the market, was because people were using them for video. And it does have video, but it doesn't have any better video than, actually it doesn't have as good of video capabilities as a camera that costs $1,500 less.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it looks more like a delay tactic for whatever's coming next year.
Right.
To where they can just do like a mid-level increment improvement, and then next year save like the big thing. I've noticed that's a trend in the the camera community.
Also,
like, they'll usually do this like every 2 years. They'll release something big, but in the middle they release bullshit. Unless you're Sony, then you're like, fuck you every year.
This is worth noting here.
Yeah.
There's a question that was, how much is the Z6? The Z6, I've got it in here, $1,996. So about the same price as the A7 III, but with not as good of specifications. So, I mean, this is the thing, we're comparing the A7 III, which is about $1,500 less than the Z7 to their flagship. The one that's the same price as the A7 doesn't really compare at all. The Max, let's see here, I have some of the specs here for it. That has 273 point phase detection autofocus, and the rest of the specs are below the A7 III, like across the board. So I just don't see a place in the market for it. And yeah, I do agree with Josh. I think it's like a thing where Nikon's like, hey, guess what? We can make mirrorless too, and then maybe they'll release something else good. But I feel like Nikon's been falling behind in both photo and video recently for a little while.
You want to talk about camera companies falling behind? When GoPro started making GoPros, and then GoPro kept making GoPros, and then what are we, like 9-10 years in, and Sony's like, hey, we can do it. Not a peep from Canon and not a peep from Nikon until just recently. I think they've got something coming out.
Yeah, well, the Canon one is also a GoPro-sized cinema camera. Like, here's the thing, Canon, the audience they're pushing for now, for the most part, like, yeah, they still make the T series and all that crap, but for the most part, Canon's pushing towards, like, super pros right now with the newer versions of the 5D Mark IV.
They're going for the 1%.
The 1DX Mark II, all their new cinema cameras. Like, Canon is really going for the pro video and pro photo market.
Well, the honest truth is that, like, Canon has pretty much the capital, or the top of the market for fit and finish with everything that's not a specification.
Yeah.
So when you look at specs, they're like, okay, this camera has 4K, camera at the same price from Canon does not. All right, well, look at the usability of that camera. Look at the lens versatility. Look at the color image. Or I'm sorry, the image color. You know, look at the quality of everything that's running out of there, the versatility of editing. Everything that Canon has that is not a specification, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is better. They have flip out screens that are touch screens. They have the best autofocus available.
Yeah, there's no questioning that. Canon definitely has the best autofocus.
Besides like specific, specifications. And I think depending on what you're looking at, that's almost equally, if not more important. Like, I'd rather have a color accurate image or an image that looks, natural than something that shoots at a higher frame rate, personally, for what I shoot. But everyone's, useful, their uses are going to be different. But like, Canon seems like they're falling behind, but like, they already set the bar so high on everything else that, if next year they came out with something that shoots, let's say they're offering a body at $1,500, right? A medium level DSLR price right now. And let's say it shoots 4K at 120 frames, which is insane.
Yeah.
And then, they have all the color, or all the Canon sort of, likes, like the flip out screen, the touch screen, dual pixel autofocus, and it has decent image quality, but it's a beast for video. That would absolutely kill everything in the market, because it has everything else besides the specs.
Well, here's the only thing Canon's missing right now. If Canon releases even a camera right now that does 1080p at 120 FPS, that's anywhere near competitively priced, or even just double the price of your average Sony camera. Like, if Canon released a $2,000 or less mirrorless, or even a DSLR that had 120 FPS at 1080p, I don't see any reason why most people would stick with Sony, because right now the main advantage of Sony is 4K. 4K form factor, 120 FPS at 1080p, and S-Log, which I do think that Canon needs to add a log format, because that does make editing a lot nicer for colors. But Canon's winning in so many areas. The only reason that I'm not using a Canon right now is just because I need the 120 FPS in a lot of cases. That's it. Otherwise, I would definitely be sticking to Canon, because Canon is my go-to. They're easier to shoot on. They have just significantly better color science. The ingest for footage is just across the board. Everything that I've ever shot with has not been quite as good as the Canons I've used.
And so, like, almost more important than anything is the lens selection.
Yes.
I mean, they have
infinite.
Yeah, Canon has the best lens selection, period. I mean, that's why like companies like...
My father and my brother both have big SLRs, and my father used to dabble in Nikon, and he dabbled in Canon, and at the end of the day, no matter who you're talking to, if you see someone with a Nikon, and you ask them what their next camera is going to be, it's always going to be a Canon. It just always is. It's just never, that's not where they're upgrading to. Because they try Nikon, everyone wants to try the other team, and then they just like, it's like, that's as good as you could do. It's like, yeah.
Right. Like the, there isn't really any competing with Canon's lens ecosystem.
What's Nikon's battery life like too?
I don't know much about that yet.
As bad as Sony or as good?
It's not as big of a battery as a Canon's going to have in it. I mean, here's the thing. Like I said, the only thing keeping me on Sony is 120 FPS, and that's because I use it so frequently. That's the only thing that's kept me on Sony is 120 FPS. So if there was a DSLR, I mean, I know there's the 1DX Mark II, but I don't have, $6,000 to drop on a DSLR. But if there was
honestly, that is the best DSLR on the market.
Oh,
or mirrorless camera. Like mirrorless camera versus that, as long as it's not a designated like video camera, like a C200 or something, that is the best you can do, period, for video.
Absolutely. The 1DX is a beast, and you can do incredible photography with it also. The 4K codec is a little bit lacking, but it does 4K, and it does stunningly beautiful 1080p at 120 FPS.
I mean, the codec is lacking, but at the same time, you don't have to like change your colors as much because they already have such stunning colors. So it's almost like, I mean, it's just, and the battery life and the build quality, and it's just amazing. It's the best camera out there right now, I think, for DSLR.
I think that's the only thing Canon missed the mark on with the C100, or what am I saying, C100? That's the only thing Canon missed the mark on the 60 Mark II, was adding a higher frame rate option. But I mean, that does do 1080 at 60, so you could still, if you're editing your timeline in 24, you could still slow that down.
Wait, are you talking about the 1DX?
I'm talking about the 60 Mark II.
Oh, okay. I think they just didn't want to fuck up their 1DX territory.
Yeah, and honestly, I've thought about switching from Sony going backwards from 4K to 1080p just so I could have a full frame Canon and just putting up with having 60 FPS as my slow-mo instead of 120, just because the Canon is just that good.
Honestly, if you set up if you go with a 60 FPS and a high shutter speed, and then do like really high, like 200-300
optical
and
flow,
go with optical flow, you're good to go, man. Like it's basically like having 120. I mean, it's not quite the same quality, but on a YouTube video, it's almost unnoticeable.
Right. Oh, it's probably loud.
Slow was going to get played out pretty soon, to be honest.
Well, I don't know. I feel like, it's overused in a lot of situations, but at the same time, it's just so useful.
I think the problem is that, like, did you ever see the new Dread movie with the slow motion drug?
Yeah, yes. I saw that.
So if it's purpose-built, I think it's cool. But if it's not, if it's just like used for B-roll, like it is right now, basically, like nobody uses it for purpose on YouTube. They use it just to slow down footage, make it smoother. I mean, they're using it for the purpose of B-roll, but it doesn't help tell a story, which means that it's not necessarily a gimmick, but it is a camera trick that you can use. And it's a style of filming. But if everyone's doing it, if that's where everyone's going, it's just going to become like the new standard, and pretty much everything that becomes the new standard goes out of fashion shortly after. So I think it's just getting overplayed, because I'm tired of seeing it in every freaking review. It's just like, dude, enough with the slow-mo. Like, if you're showing me something really important that slow-mo is useful, like a lot of the slow-mo guys' videos, then cool. But if it's not, I don't care. All right, go home, everybody. Stream's over.
No, it's not. There's still more.
Game over, man.